Hello, and welcome to Hello, I Am Clutch. Hello, I am Clutch. And I just spent 4 days in Sydney, Australia, going to see some of their best attractions, going to some very cool restaurants, and pretty much just learning how to drive on the left side of the road. Yes, there was a learning curve. And yes, the learning curve was the 1 million roundabouts.
Anyway, in this video, I want to break down what those fun attractions and good places to eat were, and kind of give you an idea of what each experience was like, in order to maybe help you plan a few things for your trip.
And yes, because I do come from a country that drives on the right side of the road, if you do stick around until the end of the video, I'll give you kind of my perspective and take on what it was like to drive on the left side of the road and some of the quirks and difficulties with that. You'd be surprised at what was actually the hardest part about that, so stick around for that one. Also, before we get into it, one thing I do really want to make sure is very clear. None of this is sponsored. This is all just stuff I really liked and that I just really want to share with you. So anyway, let's get to it.
So we're going to start talking about stuff in the Central Business District, as that's where most people go when visiting Sydney. So to help you get the lay of the land, you can go up the Sydney Tower Eye. Basically, it's a big observation tower in the middle of the city. At the top, you get some pretty great views where, on a clear day, you can see very far. But definitely be aware that some of the most iconic parts of Sydney, like the Harbour Bridge or Opera House, aren't as visible. So while it's definitely a fun way to spend some time, this experience was just okay. Although my favorite parts were, first, the elevator panel. It was in the shape of the tower and showed you where exactly the elevator was, so that was pretty cool. Also, they had the highest working postbox in all of Sydney, where you can actually send mail from, and that's the exact kind of thing I love. You know what else I love?
You, for watching this. But also,
I love visiting some of the most iconic places in a city where I've never been there before. And in Sydney, we have two major ones, the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. Now, the Opera House is one of the most iconic buildings, I feel like, in the world. And seeing it up close is absolutely worth it. Like, you don't realize this, but when you get up close, it's made of these tile-like things. So, with the Opera House, you can just walk around the outside and a bit of the inside for free. Or do what many people do and take one of their tours to go in and around the whole building. The architecture of the inside is amazing as well, with a late 60s aesthetic, and while the tours might be fun, I think one of the best ways to visit the Opera House is to do what we did and see an actual opera at the Opera House. What a novel thought!
Or is it an operatic thought?
Anyway, getting to do that was very cool, as we saw one of the more famous operas, and I only say that because I had heard of it in advance, but I'm talking about The Barber of Seville. To let you know what I thought, there's really only one appropriate way to tell you.
I really have to say that it was a great show. Yes, it was so good. Yes, it was so great. It was so good. I cannot come up with any other adjectives. It was in Italian. It was hard to understand. But I still had a good time because there were subtitles. Actually, they were surtitles because they were above the stage, but then I really got tired because I'm still suffering from jet lag.
Moving on, the other iconic architectural behemoth we have is the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You can just look at it if you want, but you can also walk across it, you can drive across it, you can take a train across it, or do what we did and climb up it. Yes, this is one of the few bridges in the world you can climb, and while a bit pricey, it is so very, very worth it. It's through the appropriately named company, Bridge Climb Sydney, and they make it so most anyone can do this adventure. So for the climb, you get to wear a very cool jumpsuit and a harness, and the whole time you are hooked to the bridge via a cable, and there are always handholds. There are a few climbs you can sign up for, but the most common one is the summit climb, where you first are kind of on a walkway under the bridge, then you take some ladders to climb topside, and then you get to walk on stairs that are not as steep as you'd think. And this takes you all the way to the top, right in the center, which leads to dorky videos of me and my wife doing this.
Yeah!
So, needless to say... Okay, actually to say...
The views, of course, are amazing. And they take pictures of you the whole way. But keep in mind, they do cost a little extra. So that means you don't get to take your own camera, which is why my pictures here are a little limited. One of my favorite parts is actually on the way back down. When you are climbing the ladders, you are on the side where you are right between the train lines. So if you're lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you feel, you'll get to climb down as trains pass you by mere inches.
Reflect on that? Because mirror inches. Anyway.
One more unique thing that I unfortunately couldn't get a picture of is that you get to drink at a couple of really interestingly placed water fountains. And I found that to be a very fun part of it. Now, near where you do the bridge climb is the Rocks neighborhood. This area is just fun to walk around, but there are also a few good places to stop and get something to eat or drink here, and that's what the next section is. So actually, before the climb, we went carb heavy and went to Pancakes on the Rocks. It's called that because it's in the Rocks neighborhood and they served, you guessed it, flapjacks. The vibe of this place was just awesome. It was like a big open cabin-y / repurposed factory setting. Either way, the star of the show was, of course, the pancakes, and as you can see here, they were unreasonably decadent.
Because when I have pancakes, my decadence cannot be reasoned with.
After the climb, we stopped at the Munich Brauhaus, Sydney. This was a great German restaurant with fun theming and lots of space. The food and beer was great, but word of advice, you might want to get more than one pretzel. As you can see here, we did not realize how modest they would be. But one other fun quirk about this place, the bathrooms. It almost felt like the Ministry of Magic. A short walk from there is the Fortune of War pub, which is Sydney's oldest pub. This place was great for its simple aesthetic and definitely worth a drink if stopping by, if only to say you went to Sydney's oldest pub. For me, phrases like that are what get me to visit. Oldest, largest, highest, longest, those words will make me visit a place.
In fact, spoilers, World's Steepest got me to go to a place that's coming up near the end of the video.
It's like a DeLorean. And then, not quite in the Rocks neighborhood, but nearby was the incredible Cantonese restaurant, Mr. Wong. You would never walk past this place by accident because it's down a random alley. And then, the outside is very unassuming, which I like because it made it feel like we found something special. But inside, this place is huge and was kind of like a labyrinth.
Sadly, no David Bowie or Muppets to be found anywhere.
While not obvious in these pictures, this place ended up being packed, so I highly recommend reservations. For dinner, we got the Peking duck pancake, which is basically a whole duck pre-cut for you and served with a bunch of toppings and wraps to essentially make little tacos. Overall, it was very tasty.
So tasty, you might even say that the duck was quacktastic.
Something you may have noticed from these restaurants, our food choices are kind of all over the place. As we found without specifically seeking it out, Australia didn't have an abundance of their own cuisine. A lot of what we had was great, but didn't seem to be very Australia exclusive, except for Vegemite, which pushes the concept of acquired taste to its breaking point. If you know, you know. One more thing I gotta mention in the Sydney Harbour area is the ferries. There are many ferries you can take to get around the city, and a lot of popular routes start and end in Circular Quay. You can use them to get across the Sydney Harbour, get to the zoo, more on that in a bit, or many other places. I have always loved fun transportation, and the ferries function as both a sightseeing trip and a form of transportation. To take the ferry, you use what is called an Opal card, or if you have credit cards with contactless payment, you can just boop that at the turnstiles to ride. Just keep in mind you need a separate card for each person. A simple suggestion I had heard to enjoy the ferry was to take it across the harbour to Manly, which is exactly what we did. This was a roughly 20-minute ride that got you great views of the Sydney skyline, the Harbour Bridge, and the Opera House, among lots of other fun sights. So, highly recommend taking that particular ferry, even if just for the fun of it. But then Manly itself was just a very fun place to walk around. And they even have a beach that you can hang out at, although I'll talk more about a different beach that we actually spent some time at in a moment. In Manly, we stopped at the Four Pines Brew Pub, which had some of the friendliest staff, but also very good beer and decent enough food. Something I'll mention now is that in Australia, most of the time, you pay up at the counter or at the front of the restaurant if it's a sit-down restaurant. So basically, we never actually paid at our table while in Australia. And also a very important note for Americans, you are not expected to tip, like truly. All of that combined makes dining out in Australia very efficient. Another stop in Manly was at Butter Boy, a place that does not serve a boy made of butter, but does in fact serve cookies. I just have to mention this because their cookies were delectable.
Which is more delicious than A, B, or C-lectable.
But with Butterboy cookies comes another thing in Australia to be aware of, and that's how there may be surcharges at restaurants and eateries on Sundays and holidays. So as you can see here, we were there on a Sunday and it added an extra 10% to the price. So just be aware of this, but usually this is pretty well advertised. But now moving back across the harbor to an area a bit outside of the main touristy area, known as the Newtown neighborhood. Sorry if the pronunciation is wrong. Because they have a solid tiki bar and a solid not so tiki bar. So first is Jacoby's Tiki Bar. This place has some solid tiki bar theming, good vibes, the drinks are great, and because this was our first night, I nearly passed out from jet lag while I was there. I especially love the colorful and vibrant menu. It really helped you see exactly what you were getting in a really cool kind of vintage looking format, and it also let you see what kind of glass you would be getting your drink in, and if there would be fire! Woo! But just down the street from Jacoby's is a place I liked even more, the Baby Dragon Bar. This is more of a mystical island paradise bar than straight tiki, and what was immediately amazing here was the wall-to-wall and even to ceiling theming. This is a small place, but every single inch was cared for, with many water features, lights, decorations, and an entire cherry blossom tree behind the bar. Not to mention a very well-designed and extensive menu full of delicious food options and elaborate cocktails that not only tasted great, but they also had some amazing fire, ice, and smoke as part of their presentations. Like, check this out!
Thank you. I'm gonna take it.
Thank you.
And then this!
Oh my god. Well, who knew? Just casually just like mixing liquid on fire.
Given this place is literally minutes from the tiki bar, it's easy to do both in a single evening. Just be aware, both are closed on Mondays and Jacoby's is also closed on Tuesdays. Going now east of the main downtown area is Bondi Beach, one of the more famous tourist beaches in the area, but I am a tourist, so it fit! There is plenty of parking nearby, but it can get pretty busy, so be prepared for that. The fun attraction here, besides going to the beach itself, is hitting up the Bondi Icebergs swimming club. While you do have to pay to get in, it gives you access to a couple of pools that are fed by the ocean. That alone was worth it to us, but while there is not a ton of space here, seeing the waves crash against the sides of the pool and then fill it was very cool.
I mean that literally. The water was freezing.
Nearby, kind of like in Manly, you can walk around to a lot of restaurants and shops, and we ended up eating at Curly Lewis Brewing. This was a cute place with some good beer and relatively basic but tasty food, so definitely worth a stop. However, I will say that my favorite part was on the outside under the sign at the front, where they have a wonderfully silly message. And so you don't have to squint, I'll just read it to you. Why are you standing here looking up at me? Stop reading, come on in, pull up a seat and wrap your lips around a cold curly one. I'd love to join you, but I have to hang here. Now for these last couple of attractions, I actually have full videos for them, so I'm not going to go too in-depth since if you watch those videos, you'll get a much better idea of what these next experiences are like. I'll put links to those videos in the description. So first, let's head over to what was my first ever international zoo, the Taronga Zoo. With its immersive habitats, winding walkways, abundance of unique animals, and insanely good views of the Sydney Harbour, this zoo was a treat. Our experience actually included a special program there called the Roar and Snore, where you get to spend the night in the zoo in a glamping tent.
I could literally hear lions roaring as I was trying to go to sleep. It was awesome.
Also, the bathrooms were much better than I would have expected. The whole experience took place after the zoo closed, so basically, you get the zoo all to yourself. During the stay, you get to have some extra special access and encounters with animals, as well as a few buffet-style meals. Also, unlimited drinks, so that was nice. But while visiting the zoo itself is a must, I would very much suggest trying to fit in a night doing the Roar and Snore, because then you get to wake up to views like this. Oh, yeah. You just get to see the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You get to see the Opera House in the distance, and the whole skyline. It's absolutely amazing. In my full video, I don't talk about the Roar and Snore too much, so check that video out to get a much better idea of what the zoo is like and all the fun animals you can see. And then finally, a bit a ways outside of Sydney, about 2 hours west, is possibly my favorite thing we did in Australia. We spent the day at Scenic World. This amazing place is home to amazing scenic views, amazing scenic rides, and amazing scenic experiences.
Amazing! And scenic!
While there's quite a lot that can be found here, the main attractions are the scenic walkway that has you strolling through a rainforest, and then the three big quote-unquote rides. The Scenic Skyway, the Scenic Cableway, and finally, the Scenic Railway.
I told you earlier, world's steepest got me to visit somewhere, and this is that somewhere.
As the Scenic Railway, with its 52-degree incline, is the steepest passenger railway in the world, so I just had to ride it. There's a lot more here than just that, including some amazing views of the Blue Mountains National Park and the Three Sisters Sandstone Peaks, so again, check out the description below for a link to actually see my full video of Scenic World. When we were there, we did what was called a bunyal tour. Again, sorry for the pronunciation, where you were taken around Scenic World with an indigenous guide to learn about Australia and its history. While it was quite enlightening, and you still got to go on all the fun modes of transportation, that experience pretty much took the whole day, so be aware that you might miss some things if you do decide to go on that specific tour. I do also want to say, given how far away Scenic World is from Sydney, I definitely recommend getting a car to get out there. Which leads me to one final thing that I know you really want to hear about. As someone who comes from a country where they drive on the right side of the road, how was driving in Australia on the left side of the road?
In short, opposite. But seriously, folks, what was actually kind of difficult about driving in Australia was that everything kind of took a little bit of extra thought before you did it. Every little maneuver, every little kind of motion you would make, just you had to kind of think truly the opposite, and that made it difficult. Like to begin with, because the steering is on the right side of the car versus the left side of the car, I would often approach the car on the wrong side to get in. That was always hilarious. But with actually driving on the left side, that wasn't too bad. That was pretty easy in and of itself. Like when you're on just like a straight road, that wasn't too bad. It was the turning and the maneuvering that was hard. So like because of it being on the left side, a left turn is now tight and a right turn is now wide. So I'd often have to say to myself when turning left, go tight, go tight, go tight. And when I was going right and I had to go wide, I'd be like, go wide, go wide, go wide. So that was something I always had to remember, because if I wasn't really thinking actively about it, it got a little treacherous at times. Another big thing was the road infrastructure in and around Sydney. Roads were relatively tight, at least compared to where I've driven before, so that's something else to kind of be aware of. But as I joked about at the way beginning, there's a million roundabouts, and they're not the same as what I have seen in America. There are more roundabouts in America than there used to be, but they're usually a little bit bigger. You have more time to understand it, where here, it was almost like they took a four-way stop sign and put a little roundabout in it, and so what you'd have to do a lot of times is just dart right into the traffic, and that could be a little treacherous, because you kind of come up to the yield signs, and if there was nobody there, you would just go. If you were seeing a line of cars, you really just had to kind of just wait for your opening and dart in. Sometimes there wasn't really a great moment. You just, as soon as you were able to do it, you went. And so that was interesting. The thing that was truly, this is the funniest thing, the true thing that was like the hardest was remembering that everything on the console was flipped. So first off, because you're on the right side of the car instead of the left side, what that means is when you put on your seatbelt, you went a different direction. When you went to go to the gear shift and shift to a different gear, you go to your left. I would hit my hand against the door all the time. It was hilarious. But the biggest thing, the hardest thing, the one that got me every single time, turn signals. It was turn signals, I say, because the turn signal and the windshield wipers were on opposite sides. So I'd go to signal a turn all the time and turn on my windshield wipers. It was never not hilarious. It was the funniest thing. It was one of those things, again, I had to think for a second when I wanted to turn, what side am I going to flip here? So that was hilarious. Then on the rare times I needed to turn on the windshield wipers, I started signaling that I was turning left or I was turning right. Again, never not hilarious. When I got back home to America, first moment I went to go turn, I turned on the windshield wipers because I was now reconditioned. So that's what it was like. It's honestly not that hard. It's more just everything takes a moment extra. With that extra moment of thinking, it's the spatial recognition that's a little bit hard. So again, you're on the right side of the car versus the left. And so when you're going to look at your mirrors on the right or the left, the space is different. You don't really think about this. So like when you're merging right, in a country that drives on the right side, you have more room to look at the mirror far away. Where here, it's right next to you. And then the opposite for the left turns, now in Australia, it's farther away. And that space difference, that was difficult. That, like, to understand what you were looking at in the mirror and then how far away the cars were, that took extra processing and was definitely harder than anything. So as much as I joke about the turn signal thing being the hardest part, I think the spatial understanding of like how far stuff is to your left and your right, because everything was flipped, takes an extra moment to process. So I would actually say that was more difficult than literally just the driving. It was the processing of space around you. So that was a lot more than I thought I was going to say, but it was all worth being said. So you're welcome. So that about wraps it up. That's a whole bunch of fun stuff to do in and around Sydney, Australia. But these were really just kind of the highlights of those experiences. So if you do have any questions, please leave a comment down below. I'd be happy to try to answer anything about any of these experiences just to help you understand it a little bit more. If this is your first time here, first of all, thank you for sticking around this long. You're amazing. Also, if you want to give this video a like, that lets me know you found value in this type of video. As this is not my normal structure. I usually do more vlog style attraction, like on-site videos. So this was actually a little bit more effort for me to do, and liking the video lets me know that this was something you really enjoyed. But if you do want to see some of my future videos, the easiest way to do that is to hit subscribe down below. That'll let you know when I got new things coming out. But just in case you don't actually feel like subscribing at this point, but you do want to watch more of my videos, I have the whole playlist of the full videos from my Australia trip, and there's some New Zealand stuff in there as well that you can watch, so you can see that there. Or if you want a different fun adventure, that video right down there is great. That's a fun one too. So until I see you in one of those, goodbye. I am still Clutch.